Her wedding ring felt loose. Not physically. She'd actually gained weight with the pregnancy, but in the way it sat on her finger like it had lost its meaning. She remembered the day Adrian slipped it on. Sun-drenched garden, laughter like wind chimes, his eyes full of promises she'd believed with every fiber of her being. "You'll never be alone again," he'd said. Back then, she thought he meant it as comfort. Now, she wondered if it had always been a warning. A soft knock startled her. It was Maria, their housekeeper, holding a folded shawl. "You're shivering, señorita," she murmured, draping it over Clara's shoulders with the tenderness of someone who'd watched her grow from a girl into a woman. "You should be resting." Clara offered a faint smile, eyes distant. "I'm fine, Maria. Really." But Maria didn't leave. Instead, she lingered, her gaze soft with unspoken concern. "He didn't come home last night again?" Clara's breath hitched, just slightly. "He had a late meeting," she said automatically. The same words she'd repeated for weeks. The same lie she told herself every time his car didn't pull into the driveway. Every time his phone went straight to voicemail. Every time she woke alone in a bed too big for one. Maria sighed, brushing a stray curl from Clara's forehead. "You carry too much, mi vida. Even for someone with your strength." Clara looked down at her hands. Her nails were neatly trimmed, her skin smooth, but inside, she felt fractured. She wanted to say something real, to admit that the man she married no longer looked at her like she mattered, that his compliments had turned to criticism, his warmth to distance, his presence to performance. But the words stuck in her throat, heavy as stones. Just then, her phone buzzed on the side table. A text from Adrian. "Meeting ran long. Don't wait up. Keep the lights low. I don't want to be disturbed when I get home. No, how are you? No, is the baby moving? No, I miss you." Just instructions. Like she was part of the furniture, another asset in his perfectly curated life. She swallowed hard, blinking back the sting in her eyes. She wouldn't cry. Not again. Not where someone might see. Because to cry would be to admit it was real, that the love she'd built her life on was crumbling beneath her feet. And if she admitted that, she'd have to face what came next. But deep inside, beneath the practiced calm and the polite smiles, a quiet voice whispered, "You deserve more than this." Outside, the rain slowed. A sliver of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden stripe across the floor, right where her bare feet rested, as if the world itself was trying to remind her, even storms pass. And sometimes the hardest part isn't surviving the storm. It's realizing you've been standing in it alone for far too long. She placed a hand on her belly again, feeling the soft flutter of a tiny kick. "I'm still here," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to her daughter or to herself. And for the first time in months, the words didn't feel like a plea. They felt like a promise. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada topico que for desenvolve. Mi conti sobrio topico tu com dialogo como su fosso espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com vida moco. Com os sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters 12:11 a.m. Adrian Vance didn't believe in luck. He believed in control, in strategy, in the precise calculation of risk versus reward. And when he married Clara Langston, he told himself it was the smartest acquisition of his life. Not because of her quiet grace, or the way her laughter used to light up even the dullest boardroom dinners. No, he married her because she was Victor Langston's daughter. Because her name opened doors his money alone couldn't crack. Because in the eyes of the old money elite, Clara was legitimacy. She was heritage. She was the human face his empire desperately needed. But now, standing in the mirrored elevator of his downtown tower, Adrian stared at his reflection and barely recognized the man looking back. His suit was immaculate. Hand-stitched Italian wool, midnight blue, worth more than most people's cars. His cufflinks gleamed with subtle arrogance. Yet his eyes were hollow. He pulled out his phone. A photo notification blinked. Clara, sitting in their sunroom that morning, sunlight in her hair, one hand resting on her belly. She looked peaceful, too peaceful, like she didn't know that his world was fracturing at the edges. Mr. Vance, his assistant, Daniel, stepped into the elevator, voice tentative. The board wants confirmation on the Singapore merger by noon, and your 11 a.m. call with the Dubai investors. I know what time it is, Adrian snapped, then immediately softened his tone. Reputation mattered. Control mattered more. Just make sure the numbers are bulletproof. One mistake, and they'll smell blood. Daniel nodded and retreated, but not before Adrian caught the flicker of pity in his eyes. Pity, from a 28-year-old assistant, that stung more than he cared to admit. He remembered the early days, the whirlwind courtship, the way Clara's father had studied him over a glass of aged bourbon, silent for what felt like an eternity before finally saying, "She's not a trophy, Adrian. She's my daughter." Adrian had laughed it off then. "Of course not, sir. I'd never." But Victor hadn't smiled. "Good, because if you ever make her feel small, I won't need lawyers to remind you who she is." At the time, Adrian thought it was bluster, an old man's protective instinct. Now, he wondered if Victor had seen through him all along. His phone buzzed again. Not a message this time, a missed call from his financial advisor. Again, he knew why. The hedge fund he'd leveraged to expand his tech portfolio? It was bleeding. Market volatility, insider rumors, a failed acquisition. Everything was slipping through his fingers like sand. And the worst part? He couldn't tell Clara. Not now. Not when she was carrying his child and looking at him with those trusting eyes that still believed he was the man she fell in love with. He stepped out onto the 42nd floor, walking past glass offices filled with people who watched him like he held the answers to their dreams. He used to feel powerful here. Now he just felt exposed. Later that evening, back in the penthouse, Clara greeted him with a soft smile. "You're home early." He loosened his tie, avoiding her gaze. "Not early. On time." She hesitated, then walked closer, her voice gentle. "I was thinking, maybe we could talk about names? For the baby." He sighed, dropping his briefcase on the marble entryway. "Clara, I've had a 17-hour day. Can this wait?" Her smile faltered just for a second, but he saw it. That tiny crack in her composure. And instead of softening, something in him hardened. Because her disappointment felt like another demand. Another thing he was failing at. "It's just, I thought you'd want to be part of it," she said quietly. "It's our daughter, Adrian." He turned then, frustration bubbling up. "You act like I'm not trying. Like I'm not building something that will protect her. Protect us. For the rest of our lives. Do you have any idea what's at stake right now?" She didn't flinch. She just looked at him with eyes so full of sorrow it made his chest ache. "I don't need more protection, Adrian. I need you." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. He wanted to pull her into his arms, to tell her he was scared, to admit that he didn't know how to fix what was breaking inside him. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he said, "I'll be in the study." And as he walked away, he heard her whisper, not to him, but to the child in her womb, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I've got you." He closed the study door behind him, but he couldn't shut out the truth echoing in. Clara sat across from Adrian at the breakfast table, the silence between them thicker than the porcelain cups steaming with untouched coffee. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, accusing shadows. She'd just come from her latest ultrasound. The doctor's voice still echoed in her ears. Healthy heartbeat, strong movements, and, "It's a girl." She'd practiced how to tell him, rehearsed it in the mirror, whispered it to her belly in the quiet hours before dawn. She wanted it to be joyful, a moment they could share, finally, a real connection, not just logistics disguised as conversation. "Adrian," she began, voice steady but tender. "The doctor confirmed it this morning. We're having a daughter." He didn't look up from his tablet. His thumb scrolled through stock tickers, headlines flashing red. "A girl," he repeated, tone flat. Not surprised. Not delighted. Just assessing. Yes, she said, leaning forward slightly, hope flickering like a candle in a draft. I thought, maybe we could start thinking about names that mean something. Something strong, like Eleanor or Vivian. He finally lifted his eyes, but not to meet hers. His gaze drifted past her, to the skyline, as if searching for an exit. A daughter, he murmured, more to himself than to her. Complicates things. The words landed like ice in her chest. Complicates what? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. He set the tablet down, finally looking at her, but not with warmth. With calculation. Clara, you know how this world works. A son carries the name, the vision, the future of a dynasty. A daughter. He paused, as if weighing how much truth she could bear. A daughter is beautiful, yes, but she's not an heir. Not in the way that matters to the board. To our investors. Her breath caught, not because she hadn't suspected this, but because hearing it spoken aloud, so coldly, so casually, made her feel like a vessel, not a wife, not a mother, just a container for what he wanted. And now, a disappointment for what she'd given him. I didn't choose her gender, she said, voice trembling but rising. She's our child. She's not a business proposal, Adrian. He stood abruptly, smoothing his jacket. You think I don't know that? His voice cracked, not with anger, but with something worse. Shame. But I'm not just a father. I'm a CEO. And right now, this company is hanging by a thread. If I show weakness, if I appear unstable, distracted, sentimental, the wolves will tear us apart. Do you understand that? She stood too, one hand instinctively cradling her belly. Then let them tear you apart. Because I won't let you treat her like a liability before she's even born. He turned toward the door, but paused, his back to her. You don't get it, Clara. Everything I've built, everything I'm trying to protect, it's for her too. But legacy isn't just love. It's structure, power, control. And what happens? She asked, voice breaking. When your legacy has no heart to carry it? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked out. The door clicked shut with finality. Clara stood alone in the sun-drenched room, tears finally spilling over. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of clarity. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet shift occurred, like a root breaking through stone. She walked to the nursery, a room she'd painted soft peach weeks ago, filled with books, a rocking chair, a mobile of stars. She ran her fingers over the crib, then stopped at the window. Outside, the city pulsed with ambition, with noise, with people chasing dreams that looked a lot like Adrian's. But her dream had changed. It wasn't about grandeur anymore. It was about safety, dignity, a world where her daughter would never be told she was complicated for simply existing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from her old friend. Lena, heard you're feeling low. Coffee tomorrow? My treat. No questions. Just presence. Clara stared at the screen, then typed back, yes, and, can I bring something? I think I need to talk. She didn't know it yet, but that coffee would be the first thread in a lifeline she didn't even know she was weaving. And far away, in a quiet office overlooking Central Park, Victor Langston received a discreet alert from his private investigator. Subject escalating emotional withdrawal. Observed distress in Mrs. Vance. Recommend intervention window, 72 hours. The old man didn't move for a long time. Then slowly he picked up the phone. Prepare the jet, he said, voice calm but edged with steel. I'm coming home. You look tired, Lena said gently, pushing one mug toward her. Clara wrapped her hands around the ceramic, letting the warmth seep into her skin. I didn't sleep, she admitted. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard him say it again. Complicates things. Like she's a problem to be managed, not a miracle. Lena didn't offer empty comfort. She just listened, her silence a kind of sanctuary. I keep telling myself he's under pressure. Clara went on, voice low. That once the baby's here, once he holds her, he'll see her. really see her. And maybe he'll remember who we are. Lena stirred her coffee slowly. And if he doesn't? The question hung in the air like smoke. Clara looked down at her belly, where her daughter kicked softly, as if answering for her. Then I'll have to be enough for both of us. Lena reached across the table, covering Clara's hand with her own. You already are. But back in the penthouse that evening, the hope Clara had clung to felt thinner than tissue paper. Adrian was home earlier than usual, standing in the nursery doorway, arms crossed. He hadn't entered the room in weeks. Now, his eyes scanned it like a stranger assessing foreign territory. Why Peach? He asked abruptly. Clara, folding tiny onesies on the rocking chair, didn't look up. It felt warm, like sunrise. He stepped inside, running a hand over the crib's edge. It's too soft, too delicate. I was thinking navy, or charcoal, something that says strength, authority. She's not a boardroom, Adrian, Clara said, her voice quiet but firm. She's a baby. He turned to her then, frustration flashing in his eyes. Don't you get it? The world won't see her as just a baby. They'll see her as my daughter. And if she walks into a room looking fragile, they'll eat her alive. So you'd rather she never feel softness at all? Clara stood, her hands resting protectively on her belly. You'd rather she grow up believing affection is weakness? I'm trying to prepare her, he shot back, voice rising. Not coddle her into naivety. And I'm trying to love her, Clara countered, tears welling but not falling. Not arm her for a war she didn't sign up for. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other. Two people who once shared dreams now standing on opposite shores of the same broken sea. Then Adrian exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I don't have time for this, Clara. The Singapore deal collapses next week if I don't secure emergency funding. Do you understand what that means? It's not just my company, it's thousands of jobs. Our name, our future. Our future doesn't have to be your fear, she whispered. He didn't answer, just turned and walked out. The nursery door left ajar behind him. That night, Clara lay awake long after the city lights dimmed. Adrian slept in the study again. On the couch, she assumed, though she hadn't checked. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the steady flutter of life within. I'm sorry, she whispered into the dark. I wanted your father to love you before you even opened your eyes. I thought if I was patient enough, kind enough, he'd remember how to be human. A soft kick. She smiled through tears. But you're already teaching me something, aren't you? That love isn't about waiting for someone to come back to you. It's about never leaving yourself. The next morning, she called Lena again. I need help, she said, voice steadier than she felt. Real help. Legal. Emotional. Everything. Lena didn't hesitate. I know someone. Discreet. Brilliant. And she only takes cases where the client is ready to fight, not just survive. Clara closed her eyes. I'm ready. Unbeknownst to her, miles away, Victor Langston had just landed. His driver waited outside the private terminal, but Victor didn't get in. Instead, he stood beneath the gray morning sky, phone pressed to his ear. Has she reached out to anyone? He asked, voice low. Yes, sir, came the reply. A friend. And she made a call this morning to a family law attorney. Slow nod, a flicker of pride in his weary eyes. That's my girl. He got into the car. Take me to her, but don't announce me. I want to see her first, just as her father. Yes, fixed ahead like a soldier returning to a battlefield he never wanted to see again. He hadn't been inside that penthouse since the wedding reception. Back then, he'd watched his daughter dance in Adrian's arms, her face glowing with trust, and he'd prayed, silently, fiercely, that the man holding her would prove worthy. He'd given Adrian space, respect, a chance, because Clara had asked him to. But now, watching from across the street as a silhouette moved behind the nursery window, he knew the time for silence was over. Clara didn't see him at first. She was kneeling by the crib, fastening a mobile of tiny silver stars Lena had gifted her. Her hair was loose, her sweater oversized, and she hummed softly. A lullaby Victor remembered singing to her when she was just a baby, scared of thunder. He pressed the intercom. "Who is it?" Her voice, cautious. "It's me," he said simply. A pause. Then the door unlocked with a soft click. She opened it before he reached the top step. And when she saw him, really saw him, her breath caught. Not in surprise, in relief, like her soul had been holding its breath for months, and only now dared to exhale. "Dad," she whispered. He didn't say a word, just opened his arms. She fell into them, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself cry, quiet, shuddering sobs that carried all the loneliness, the fear, the silent battles fought in the dark. He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other resting gently on her belly, as if shielding both his daughter and his granddaughter from a world that had grown too sharp. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I should have come sooner." She shook her head against his chest. "You came when I needed you most." They sat on the sofa, the same one where she'd once curled up with Adrian, dreaming of futures that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. Victor studied her face, the shadows under her eyes, the new quietness in her voice. "He doesn't see her, does he?" Victor asked gently. Clara looked down at her hands. "He sees a risk, complication, not a person." Victor's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, dangerously calm. "And you? What do you see?" She placed a hand on her belly. "I see her, all of her, her laugh, her fire, her kindness. I see who she'll be, even if he never does." Victor reached into his coat pocket and handed her a slim folder. "I've had my team compile everything. Financial records, property holdings, communication logs. Anything that shows a pattern of emotional control, isolation, pressure. It's not about revenge, Clara. It's about protection." Her eyes widened. "You've been watching. I've been waiting," he corrected. "Waiting for you to decide you were worth fighting for." She swallowed. "I didn't know how. You do now." A silence settled between them, not empty, but full of understanding. Then, from the hallway, the elevator dinged. Clara froze. Victor didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the door. Keys jingled. Footsteps. Adrian. He stepped inside, loosening his tie, already speaking before he saw them. "Clara, I need you to sign the escrow docs for the..." He stopped dead. His gaze darted from Clara, still tear-streaked but composed, to Victor, sitting beside her like a mountain that had just risen from the earth. "Mr. Langston," Adrian said, voice tight, shifting instantly into performance mode. "This is a surprise." Victor stood slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Not really," he said. "I've been meaning to visit my daughter. And my granddaughter." Adrian's eyes flickered to Clara's belly, then back to Victor. "Of course. But this is exactly the right time." Victor cut in, stepping forward. "Because I need you to understand something, Adrian. You married my daughter. You promised to cherish her. And if you ever make her feel like a burden again, you won't be dealing with boardrooms or investors." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You'll be dealing with me." Adrian's throat worked. He glanced at Clara, searching for an ally, but found only quiet resolve in her eyes. "I care about her," he said, voice strained. "I'm just trying to build an empire on her silence." Victor finished. "I've seen men like you before. Brilliant, driven, blind, and they always think love is a negotiation." He turned to Clara, his voice softening. "But you, my dear, you were never part of the deal. You were the reason the deal should have mattered less." Clara reached for her father's hand, fingers trembling but sure. Adrian stood alone in the center of the room. He'd filled with expensive things but emptied of everything that mattered. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was final. And in that moment, as rain began to patter against the windows once more, Clara realized something. She wasn't waiting for a miracle anymore. She was the miracle, and her father had just handed her back her voice. Clara, meanwhile, began to breathe differently, deeper, freer. She started taking walks in the park below, just 10 minutes at first, then 20, her hand resting on her growing bump, the morning air filling her lungs like a long-forgotten promise. She enrolled in a prenatal yoga class, called her mother's old friends, even laughed, real laughter, during a video call with Lena, who teased her about naming the baby after a 19th century poet. But Adrian watched, always watching. One evening, as Clara sorted baby clothes by the nursery window, he appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You've been busy," he said, not accusatory, not yet, just observing. "I've been living," she replied without looking up. He stepped inside, his voice dropping. "Do you think I don't see what you're doing? Building an army while I'm trying to save everything we have." She finally turned to him. "I'm not building an army, Adrian. I'm building a life. One that doesn't depend on your approval." He flinched, almost imperceptibly, but his voice hardened. "You think your father can protect you from the truth? From the fact that if my company falls, everything falls? The foundation, the hospital wing in your mother's name, even this building. It's all tied to my holdings. You walk away and you don't just lose a husband. You lose your world." For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Not for himself, for her. And that scared her more than his anger ever had. "Is that a threat?" she asked softly. "It's a reality," he said, running a hand through his hair. The gesture so exhausted it broke something in her. "I'm drowning, Clara. And instead of throwing me a rope, you're stepping onto the shore and calling it courage." She walked toward him, stopping just an arm's length away. "You never asked for a rope. You asked me to hold my breath while you pretended you weren't sinking." He looked at her belly then, not with coldness, but with a kind of desperate longing. "What if I lose her before I even know her?" The raw vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. For a heartbeat, she saw the man she'd married. The one who used to read poetry to her in bed, who cried at her mother's funeral, who once held her for hours after a miscarriage scare. But then he blinked, and the mask slid back into place. "I'll fix this," he said, more to himself than to her. "I always do." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Just don't make any decisions yet. Not until you see what I'm capable of." She didn't answer. Later that night, alone in bed, her phone buzzed. A notification from her bank app, one she'd set up on Lena's advice. A large transfer, $2.3 million, from Adrian's private investment account into an offshore shell company she'd never heard of. Her blood ran cold. She opened her laptop, fingers trembling as she typed the company name into a corporate registry. The entity was registered in the Cayman Islands. No public officers, no physical address, just a string of numbers and a name, Vesper Holdings. And then she remembered. 3 weeks ago, during a rare dinner, Adrian had mentioned it in passing. Just a contingency fund, in case things go sideways. She'd thought nothing of it. Now she understood. He wasn't just preparing for failure. He was preparing to disappear. And if he took that money, if he vanished before the baby was born, she'd be left with debts, lawsuits, and a child to raise alone, without even the safety net of his name. Panic clawed at her throat. She wanted to scream, to run. But instead, she took a slow breath, placed a hand on her belly, and whispered, "Not this time." She picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd saved but never used. "Ms. Langston?" came a calm, professional voice. "I need to speak to your father," Clara said. "Now." 2 hours later, Victor sat across from her in the study, the bank alert printed on his lap, his face carved from stone. "He's not just scared," Victor said quietly. "He's cornered, and cornered men do dangerous things." "What do I do?" Clara asked, voice trembling. Victor reached across the table and took her hand. "You let me handle the fire. You protect the light." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Adrian's side of the bed was cold, unmade. His phone charger was gone from the nightstand. Her stomach knotted. She walked through the apartment, calling his name softly at first, then louder. The study was empty, his laptop gone, files cleared from the desk. Even the framed photo of their wedding, once displayed on the console, had been turned face down. He hadn't left. Not completely, but he was vanishing in pieces. Then, on the kitchen counter, a single envelope. Her name written in his precise, angular hand. Hands shaking, she opened it. "Clara, I need space to fix this. Don't listen to anyone who tells you I've abandoned you. I'm fighting for us, for her. I'll be back before you know it. Until then, trust me. No address, no number, no date, just silence wrapped in paper." She stood there, the note trembling in her fingers, the baby kicking fiercely inside her, as if sensing the betrayal before her mother could name it. Later that day, Lena arrived unannounced, arms full of groceries and a bag of prenatal vitamins. She took one look at Clara's face and dropped everything. "He's gone, hasn't he?" Clara nodded, unable to speak. Lena pulled her into a tight hug. "Okay, breathe. You're not alone." But Clara's mind raced. "Trust me." Those two words used to mean safety. Now they felt like chains. That evening, Victor came again. This time with a woman in a tailored navy suit, calm eyes, and a voice like tempered steel. "This is Evelyn Cho," Victor said. "She's one of the best family law and asset protection attorneys in the country." Evelyn offered a gentle nod. "Clara, I know this feels overwhelming, but we're going to move quickly and quietly. First, I need to secure your immediate safety, financial and physical. Then, we freeze anything he's trying to move." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "He promised he'd come back." "He might," Evelyn said, not unkindly. "But hope isn't a legal strategy." Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to believe in him anymore, sweetheart. You just have to believe in her." He nodded toward her belly. Clara closed her eyes, and in that moment, she made a choice, not out of anger, but out of love. "I want to file for legal separation," she said, voice clearer now. "And full custody." Evelyn nodded. "We'll also petition for an emergency financial injunction. If he's moving assets, we stop it before he disappears completely." Just then, Clara's phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Clara?" A man's voice, tense, urgent. "It's Daniel, Adrian's assistant." Her heart leapt. "Daniel? Is he? He's in trouble?" Daniel cut in, voice low. "He met with a private broker last night. Tried to liquidate everything, stocks, patents, even the penthouse deed. But the buyer, he's not legitimate. He's connected to a group that's been under federal investigation. If Adrian signs those papers tomorrow, he won't just lose everything. He'll be implicated." Clara's breath caught. "Why are you telling me this?" A long pause. "Because I've watched you carry this family with grace while he crumbled. And because I think he's trying to leave you with nothing but debt and a baby. That's not right." Tears blurred her vision. "Where is he?" "He's at the Grand Meridian Hotel, room 1409. He's been there since last night, barely sleeping, just staring out the window." She hung up, turned to Victor and Evelyn. "He's at the Grand Meridian. He's about to sign something that could destroy us all." Victor's eyes darkened. "Then we stop him. Not for his sake, for yours." That night, as rain began to fall in thick, silver sheets, Clara sat by the window, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the separation papers Evelyn had drafted. "I'm not waiting for you to come back anymore," she whispered into the storm. "I'm moving forward, with or without you." His reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger. Hollow-eyed, unshaven, shoulders slumped under the weight of choices that had stopped feeling like choices hours ago. A knock at the door startled him. He didn't answer, didn't move. The knock came again, softer this time, but insistent. Cursing under his breath, he stood and opened the door just a crack. Daniel stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a brown envelope sealed with red wax. No logo, no label, just his name, Adrian Vance. "What is this?" Adrian asked, voice rough. Daniel didn't hand it over. "It's from Victor Langston." Adrian stiffened. "I didn't ask for anything from him." "You don't have to," Daniel said quietly. "But you should read it before you sign anything tonight." Adrian hesitated, then snatched the envelope. He shut the door without another word. Back inside, he tore it open. No letter, just a single photograph. His breath stopped. It was Clara, taken 3 days ago in the park. She was laughing, head tilted back, one hand on her belly, sunlight catching the gold in her hair. She looked whole, peaceful, free. On the back, in Victor's elegant script, "She never stopped believing in you, but she's finally started believing in herself. Don't make her regret that." Adrian sank into the armchair, the photo trembling in his hand. He traced the curve of her smile with his thumb, remembering how she used to look at him that way, before the board meetings, the late nights, the slow erosion of everything soft between them. A noise from the hallway made him look up. Not Daniel, Clara. She stood in the doorway, rain glistening in her hair, wearing a simple coat, her belly full and unmistakable beneath it. She hadn't knocked. The door had been left slightly ajar. "You came," he whispered, stunned. "I had to," she said, stepping inside. Her voice wasn't angry. It was sorrowful, resolved. "I couldn't let you destroy yourself or us." In the dark, he looked down at the documents. "I was trying to protect you." "By leaving?" she asked softly. "By selling everything to men who don't care if you live or die." "That's not protection, Adrian. That's surrender." He stood, pacing like a caged animal. "What choice do I have? The board's turning. Creditors are circling. If I don't liquidate, they'll seize everything, including our home. Your name, her future. And if you sign those papers," she countered, "you'll be giving her a future built on lies and legal shadows. Is that the legacy you want?" He stopped, turning to her. "Then what do you propose? That we start over? With nothing?" "No," she said, stepping closer. "That we start honestly, with truth, with humility, with the courage to say, 'I failed, but I'm still here.'" He shook his head, tears welling. "I don't know how to be that man anymore." "You don't have to become him overnight," she said gently. "But you have to choose him, today." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the drumming rain and the quiet flutter of life inside her. Then, slowly, Adrian picked up the pen, not to sign but to set it aside. He walked to the window, watching the city blur through the rain-streaked glass. "What happens now?" he asked, voice raw. Clara took a deep breath. "Now you call Evelyn Cho. You tell her everything. Every asset, every debt, every fear. And you let us help you. Not as a CEO, not as a husband trying to save face, but as a father who's finally ready to be seen." He turned to her then, really looked at her, not as a liability, not as a symbol, but as the woman who had carried his child through silence and still found the strength to walk into a storm for him. "I'm scared," he admitted, voice breaking. She reached for his hand. "So am I. But we don't have to be scared alone." Outside, the rain began to ease. A single street lamp flickered on below, casting a golden pool on the wet pavement, like a path forward, slowly emerging from the dark. And in that quiet hotel room, for the first time in months, Adrian Vance didn't reach, but Adrian had insisted on escorting her. "You need to be seen," he'd said that morning, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced precision. "People are talking. If we appear united, it stabilizes the company. Buys us time." She'd studied him in the mirror. "Is that all I am to you now? A stabilizer?" He'd paused, then met her eyes. "No, but right now, I need you to be both. My wife and my shield." She'd agreed. Not for him. For the breathing space it might buy them while Evelyn unraveled the legal knots he'd tied. Now, standing in the grand ballroom of the Aurelian, Clara felt every gaze like a pinprick. Whispers followed her like ghosts. "Is it true he's bankrupt? She's still with him? After everything? Do you think the baby's even his?" Her fingers tightened around her clutch. Adrian, ever the performer, smiled at donors, shook hands, laughed at jokes that didn't reach his eyes. But when he turned to her, his mask slipped, just for a second. A look of apology, of warning. Then came her. Natalie Kensington, heiress, socialite, and one of Adrian's earliest investors. Sashayed over in a gown that cost more than most people's cars. A champagne flute dangling from her manicured fingers. "Clara, darling," she cooed, air-kissing the air beside Clara's cheek. "You look radiant, though I hear stress isn't great for the baby's development. So tragic what's happening with Adrian's little empire." Clara kept her voice calm. "We're managing." Natalie leaned in, voice dropping to a syrupy whisper. "He came to me last week, you know, begged for a bridge loan, said you'd checked out emotionally. Poor thing, he's so alone." Before Clara could respond, Adrian appeared at her side, his smile sharp as glass. "Natalie, still spreading fairy tales, I see." Natalie laughed, but her eyes stayed cold. "Just looking out for you, Adrian. After all, if your wife won't protect your legacy, someone has to." Clara felt the room tilt. She placed a hand on her belly, grounding herself. But Adrian stepped forward, his voice low but carrying. "My wife doesn't protect my legacy, Natalie. She is it." A hush fell over the nearby guests. Natalie blinked, caught off guard. Adrian turned to Clara, his expression softening. "Not for show, but for real. Every decision I've made lately has been out of fear. But standing here, watching you carry our daughter with grace, while the world whispers knives behind your back, I realize I've been protecting the wrong things." He took her hand publicly, unashamedly. "My legacy isn't in stock prices or skyscrapers. It's in her eyes, in your strength. And I won't let anyone, make you feel small for it again." The crowd parted like waves. Natalie's smirk vanished. She turned and melted into the glittering throng, defeated not by power, but by truth. Later, in the quiet of the car ride home, Clara stared out the window, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "He's never defended me like that before," she whispered. Adrian didn't look at her, just reached across the seat and covered her hand with his. "I should have started years ago." She turned to him then. "Why now?" He finally met her gaze, his eyes raw with regret. "Because tonight, I saw what I almost lost. Not my company, not my name, you, and her." He nodded toward her belly. "And I realized, if I let pride or fear steal one more moment of your light, I don't deserve to stand in it." Outside, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and violet. And for the first time in a long time, Clara believed, not that everything would be perfect, but that they might finally be real. But as the car pulled into the underground garage, her phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. "Got the forensic audit back. There's more, Clara. Much more. We need to talk. Tonight." Her breath caught. The battle wasn't over. It had just changed shape. And somewhere in the shadows, the real cost of Adrian's secrets was still waiting living room. Still in her emerald gown. The gala's glitter long faded from her skin, her mind racing faster than the storm outside. Evelyn sat across from her on the sofa, tablet in hand, face unreadable. Adrian had excused himself to take a call. A flimsy excuse they both saw through. He was giving her space, or maybe just buying time. "Show me," Clara said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Evelyn turned the screen toward her. Bank transfers, shell companies, false invoices, a web so intricate it made Clara's stomach churn. "He didn't just try to move money, Clara," Evelyn said quietly. "He falsified asset valuations, inflated revenue projections to secure loans. And 2 weeks ago, he authorized a $4 million payment to a consulting firm that doesn't exist, registered under a dead man's social security number." Clara stared at the screen, the words blurring. "That's fraud. Criminal fraud," Evelyn confirmed. "If federal investigators connect him to this, and they will, he's not just facing bankruptcy. He's facing prison." A cold wave washed over her. Not fear for him. Not yet. but for the child growing inside her, for the name she would carry, for the future already stained before it began. Just then, the door clicked open. Lena stood there, soaked, breathless, holding 2 paper cups of tea like a lifeline. "I got your text," she said, eyes wide with worry. "I came as fast as I could." Clara rushed to her, nearly collapsing into her arms. "He's in trouble, Lena. Real trouble." Lena set the tea down and gripped Clara's shoulders. "Then we get him help. Not just lawyers. Real help. Therapists, crisis counselors, people who've pulled men back from this exact ledge." "But what if he doesn't want to be pulled?" Clara whispered, tears spilling over. "What if he'd rather burn everything down than admit he's broken?" Lena cupped her face. "Then you save yourself. And your daughter. You don't have to drown because he jumped." The words struck like lightning. Clara stepped back, wiping her eyes, breathing deeply. "I thought, after tonight, he was changing." "He might be," Lena said gently, "but change doesn't erase consequences. And you can't build a future on hope alone." From the hallway, a soft voice interrupted. "She's right." Adrian stood there, phone in hand, face pale. He'd heard everything. He walked in slowly, eyes fixed on Clara. "I didn't know about the dead man's SSN," he said, voice raw. "I was desperate. My CFO, he assured me it was creative accounting. Standard practice." "Standard practice doesn't land you in federal prison," Evelyn said flatly. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. "I thought I was saving us. Instead, I buried us deeper." Clara looked at him, really looked, not as the man who'd hurt her, but as the man crumbling under the weight of his own pride. "Do you want to fix this?" she asked quietly. He lifted his head, eyes red-rimmed. "More than anything, then you do exactly what Evelyn says. You cooperate, you confess, you take responsibility, not to save your company, but to save your soul." He nodded, voice breaking. "I'm scared I've already lost you." Clara walked to him, placed a hand on his knee. "You haven't lost me, but you're losing time. And with every second you wait, you risk not just your freedom, but your chance to meet your daughter in a courtroom instead of a nursery." A long silence. Rain tapped the glass like a heartbeat. Then Adrian turned to Evelyn. "Tell me what to do." Evelyn didn't smile, but she nodded. "First, you call your CFO. Tell him you're shutting down all off-the-books transactions, effective immediately. Then you grant me full access to every server, every email, every ledger. We're going to build a transparency wall so thick, even the feds won't be able to break through." Adrian stood, jaw set. "Done." As Evelyn began making calls, Clara stepped onto the balcony, the cold night air sharp against her skin. Lena joined her, handing her a dry shawl. "You're stronger than you know," Lena said softly. Clara looked out over the city, lights shimmering through the rain. "I'm not strong. I'm just tired of pretending." Inside, Adrian's voice rose slightly, firm, clear, finally present. "Yes, I authorized it, and I'll own every mistake." For the first time in months, Clara felt something unfamiliar. Not hope, clarity. But as she turned back toward the glass doors, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new message. Anonymous number. "He's lying, Clara. The $4 million wasn't for a shell company. It was for a private security team. He's planning to disappear with the baby." Her blood turned to ice. She looked through the window. Adrian was pacing, running a hand through his hair. Agitated, yes, but also calculating? Was this still the man trying to redeem himself? Or the man preparing his final escape? The stit was a lie. Then she'd be poisoning the one fragile thread of trust they'd just begun to weave. She stepped back inside, forcing her breathing to steady, her expression neutral. But her mind raced like a trapped bird. Adrian was on the phone again, voice low but urgent. "Yes, cancel the transfer. All of them. I don't care about the penalty." He caught her eye and offered a small, tired smile. Reassuring, practiced. The kind he used in boardrooms. But now, Clara saw the flicker behind it. the tension in his jaw, the way his thumb tapped restlessly against his thigh, a tell she'd noticed only when he was lying. Later that night, after Evelyn left and Lena promised to stay on the guest sofa, just in case, Clara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Adrian slept beside her, close but not touching. His breathing was too even, too controlled, like he was pretending to sleep. At 2:17 a.m., he slipped out of bed. She listened as he moved silently through the apartment, opening his study, typing rapidly, then the soft click of a drawer. A minute later, the front door whispered shut. Heart pounding, Clara rose and crept to the window. Below, Adrian stood on the sidewalk, hood up against the drizzle, speaking into his phone, pacing like a man with minutes to live. She grabbed her own phone, opened a secure messaging app Lena had installed, and typed, "He's outside, acting suspicious. Track his location." Lena replied instantly, "Already on it. Stay inside. Lock the door." Clara obeyed, but her hands shook. She returned to bed, pulling the covers high, pretending sleep when he finally slipped back in an hour later, smelling of rain and something sharp, like airport disinfectant. The next morning, over breakfast neither of them ate. Adrian was uncharacteristically gentle. He poured her tea, buttered her toast, even placed a hand on her belly and whispered, "Good morning, little one." Clara forced a smile. "You seem lighter." "I made the right call last night," he said, eyes earnest. "I'm finally doing things the honest way." She wanted to believe him. God, she did. But the message haunted her. He's planning to disappear with the baby. That afternoon, while he was in a virtual deposition, Clara quietly searched his study. She didn't snoop through files. She knew he'd notice. Instead, she checked the trash bin on his laptop. Deleted emails. One caught her eye, sent at 2:34 a.m. Subject: Final itinerary, Flight 482, Geneva. Passenger, AV plus infant. Documents ready. Nurse on standby. Her breath stopped. Geneva, a country with no extradition treaty for certain civil custody cases. A place where a wealthy man could vanish with a newborn and never be found. She backed away from the desk, nausea rising. He wasn't just planning to leave. He was planning to take her daughter before she was even born. That evening, as rain returned with a vengeance, Adrian came to her in the nursery, where she sat rocking gently in the chair, eyes red-rimmed but dry. "You've been quiet," he said, crouching in front of her. She looked at him, really looked. The man she'd loved, the man she'd feared, the father of her child. "Did you mean what you said last night?" she asked softly. "About choosing us?" His eyes softened. "Every word." "Then prove it," she said, voice trembling but clear. "Give me your passport." He blinked. "What?" "Your passport, Adrian. Your private jet access codes. Your offshore account keys. All of it. Hand it over to Evelyn. Today." He stood slowly, expression shifting from confusion to something colder. "You don't trust me." "I trusted you for years," she said, standing now, one hand on her belly. "I trusted you when you called me weak, when you disappeared for days, when you looked at our daughter like she was a mistake. I trusted you even when you broke me, but I won't trust you with her life." He stepped closer, voice low, intense. "You think I'd take her from you? After everything? I think you'd rather lose your freedom than lose control," she shot back. "And a baby in another country is the one thing even your father-in-law can't reach." His silence was answer enough. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder cracked like a warning. Then softly, he said, "You're right. I did look into it. For one night, in my darkest hour. But I didn't go through with it. Because the moment I imagined her face without you in it, I couldn't breathe." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Then why keep the plans? Why lie?" "Because admitting how close I came to destroying us felt like admitting I'm broken beyond repair," he whispered. "And I was so tired of being the villain." She studied his face. The pain, the shame, the flicker of hope beneath it. "Then be honest," she said. "Not for the courts. Not for your image. For her. A long pause. Then, slowly, he pulled his wallet from his coat, removed his passport, placed it in her hand. Take it, he said. And if I ever scare you again, don't hesitate to walk away. She held the passport, heavy with possibility. But she didn't feel victory. She felt grief. For the love that had twisted. For the trust that had shattered. For the terrifying truth that even redemption has a cost. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the nursery, for the first time, two broken people chose to face the lightning. Not as enemies, but as parents. And somewhere deep in the night, Clara watched him carefully. Not with suspicion, not anymore, but with the cautious tenderness of someone tending a fragile flame in a windstorm. She let him sit with her in the nursery. Let him talk to their daughter through her belly. Let him hold her hand during contractions that came and went like false alarms. But Victor wasn't fooled by the calm. He'd been watching longer, and he knew real change doesn't happen in boardrooms or therapy offices. It happens in the dark, when no one's watching, and Adrian hadn't been tested yet. One rainy Tuesday, Victor arrived unannounced, his coat damp, eyes sharp as flint. He found Clara in the sunroom, wrapped in a blanket, reading aloud from a dog-eared copy of The Little Prince. She kicks every time I read about the rose, Clara said with a faint smile, not looking up. Victor sat beside her. He's behaving. He is, she agreed softly. But I don't know if it's because he's changed, or because he's cornered. Victor placed a hand over hers. There's only one way to find out. That evening, as thunder rolled in the distance, Victor invited Adrian to his study, ostensibly to discuss asset restructuring. But the moment the door closed, Victor slid a folder across the desk. Adrian frowned. What's this? An opportunity, Victor said, voice calm. A private investment group in Zurich has offered to buy your controlling stake in Vance Dynamics for double market value. Cash. No questions. They want discretion, and they're willing to wire the funds within 48 hours. Adrian's eyes widened. That's impossible. No legitimate buyer would. They're not entirely legitimate, Victor admitted, but they're clean enough. And with your current exposure, this could erase your debt, protect Clara, and give you a fresh start, far from the scandal. Adrian stared at the folder, fingers twitching. The numbers were astronomical, enough to vanish, to rebuild, to control everything again. His breath quickened. Victor watched him, every micro-expression, every shift in posture. You'd never have to face the consequences, Victor said quietly. Clara would be safe. Your daughter would never know the truth. And you'd be free. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. Then, slowly, he closed the folder and pushed it back. No, Victor raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because running won't fix what I broke, Adrian said, voice rough but steady. And if I take that money, I'm telling Clara and our daughter that integrity has a price. And I won't be the man who taught her that. Victor studied him for a long moment. Then, to Adrian's shock, he smiled, just slightly. Good. Adrian blinked. You set this up? Victor stood, walking to the window. I needed to know if the change was real, or just performance. Adrian's shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in release. I would have taken it 6 months ago, without hesitation. And now? Victor asked. Now I'd rather lose everything than lose her respect. Outside, rain softened to a drizzle. A sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds. Victor turned, eyes glistening. Then you're ready. For what? To meet your daughter, Victor said. Because Clara's in labor. Adrian froze. What? But it's 3 weeks early. She's at St. Luke's. Lena's with her. But she asked for you. He was out the door before Victor finished the sentence. In the hospital room, Clara lay propped up, sweat on her brow, eyes wide with pain and something else. Fear. Not of childbirth. Of him. When he rushed in, breathless, she searched his face. Did you take it? She whispered. He knelt beside the bed, took her hand. No. I chose you. Tears filled her eyes. Why? "Because you're my home," he said, voice breaking, and I finally stopped running from it. She squeezed his hand just as a contraction seized her. "Then stay. Please, don't leave even for a second." "I won't," he promised, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'm right here." Hours later, as dawn painted the sky in rose and gold, their daughter was born. Small, fierce, and perfect. Adrian held her for the first time, tears streaming down his face. "She's everything." Clara, exhausted but radiant, reached for his hand. "Her name is Elise, after my mother." He nodded, voice thick. Elise Langston Vance. And in that quiet hospital room, with the storm finally past, two souls who had nearly drowned in silence found their way back to each other. Not as the people they were, but as the people they chose to become. But outside the window, a black sedan idled across the street. A man in a dark coat watched the maternity ward. And in his pocket, a burner phone buzzed once. Target confirmed. Proceed on schedule. The Clara watched him, heart aching not just with love, but with caution. The man holding her baby was gentler than she'd ever seen him. But the black sedan she'd glimpsed outside the hospital? The strange man who'd lingered near the flower shop across the street? She hadn't told Adrian. Didn't want to shatter this fragile new world they'd built. Until the night everything tilted again. It started with a simple decision. Clara wanted to move Elisa's bassinet into their room, just for a few more nights. Adrian, exhausted, snapped. "Why do you keep changing things?" he said, voice sharp as he lifted the bassinet. "We agreed on the nursery schedule. Sleep training starts at 6 weeks. You can't keep coddling her like this. It sets a precedent." Clara stared at him, stunned. "She's 10 days old, Adrian. She's not a project to optimize." "I'm trying to build structure," he shot back, setting the bassinet down harder than he meant to. It let out a low creak, like a warning. Elise stirred, then began to cry. Clara rushed to pick her up, cradling her close. "You're scaring her." "I'm not scaring her. I'm preparing her." His voice rose, edged with the old frustration, the old need to control. "The world won't bend for her tears, Clara. Why should we?" Something in Clara snapped, not loudly, but deeply. She turned to him, Elise calm now against her chest, and spoke with a quiet force that cut through the room like glass. "No, you don't get to decide what preparing her looks like. Not after everything. You don't get to turn love into a performance, or motherhood into a flaw to be corrected." He started to speak, but she held up a hand. "You held her today like you meant it, like you finally saw her. But the second things don't go your way, you fall back into that cold, calculating version of yourself, the one who sees people as problems to solve." Her voice cracked. "I won't let you do that to her. Not ever." He stepped back as if struck. "I'm not." "Yes, you are," she said, tears welling but not falling. "And if you can't feel that truth in your bones right now, then you're not ready to be her father." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Adrian looked at Elise, her tiny fingers curled around Clara's shirt, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been while he held her. And in that moment he saw it, not inefficiency, not weakness, trust. He sank into the armchair, head in his hands. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "I've spent my whole life believing strength means control. And now, she just needs me to be there. And I don't know how to be enough without a plan." Clara walked over slowly, knelt in front of him. "You don't have to be enough. You just have to be present. And honest, even when you're scared." He looked up, eyes raw. "What if I fail again?" "You will," she said softly. "But you'll also come back. And that's what matters." He reached out, brushing a finger gently over Elisa's cheek. She turned her head toward his touch, and for the first time he felt it, not ownership, but connection. "I'm sorry," he breathed. Clara placed her free hand over his. "Then show her. Every day." They sat like that in the dim nursery, the city quiet outside, the only sound Elisa's soft breathing and the quiet hum of a family learning to heal. But across the street, the black sedan rolled forward slowly, stopping beneath a flickering street lamp. The man in the dark coat stepped out, not looking at the penthouse, but at his phone. She's bonding with him. Fast. If we're going to move, it has to be tonight. He slipped a small device into his pocket, silent, sleek, designed to mimic a hospital wristband. Inside the apartment, Adrian stood, cradling Elise as Clara stepped into the hallway to answer the doorbell. "No deliveries this late," she murmured, peering through the peephole. No one was there, but on the floor a single white envelope. Her name written in a hand she didn't recognize. Heart pounding, she opened it. Inside, a photo. Her holding Elise in the hospital. And scrawled on the back in red ink, "You don't deserve her." She slammed the door, locked it, backed away. Upstairs, Adrian called out, "Clara? Everything okay?" She forced her voice steady. "Yes, just a wrong delivery." But her hands shook as she dialed Victor. He answered on the first ring. "They know where we are," she whispered. And in the nursery, as rain began to fall once more, but sleep wouldn't come. At 2 a.m., she slipped from bed, padded barefoot to the study, and dialed Victor. Not on her personal phone. On the encrypted line he'd insisted she keep hidden. He answered instantly. "You saw it." "I saw it," she whispered, voice raw. "Who are they, Dad?" A pause. Heavy. Final. "Not they. Him. Adrian's CFO," Victor said quietly. "Marcus Wren. He's not just a financial officer, he's ex-intelligence. Private sector, but the kind that doesn't leave paper trails. When Adrian cut him off and handed everything to Evelyn, Marcus lost more than his cut. He lost control. And men like him, they don't let go." Clara's blood ran cold. "He threatened us." "He's sending a message," Victor corrected. "He wants Adrian to reverse course, to sign those offshore papers and disappear with Elise. He's counting on your husband's fear to override his conscience." She leaned against the desk, her free hand clutching her robe. "What do? We move. Now." "No," she said sharply. "Not again. I won't run like prey. Elise deserves to sleep in her own crib, not in some safe house wondering why her parents are always looking over their shoulders." Victor sighed. "Then we bring the fight to him. But Clara, if we do this, there's no turning back. We expose everything: Adrian's fraud, Marcus's blackmail, the shell companies. It'll be public. Brutal. The media will tear you both apart." She looked toward the hallway, where soft light glowed under the nursery door. Adrian was in there, singing badly, to Elise, his voice full of a tenderness she'd once thought he'd lost forever. "I don't care about the headlines," she said softly, "but I won't let fear dictate her first memories. If we're going to be a family, we do it in the light, not in hiding." Victor was silent for a long moment. Then, "I'll have my team prepare the evidence dump, but you need to get Adrian on board. Tonight, because if Marcus realizes we're closing in, he won't send another photo. He'll come himself." She hung up and walked slowly to the nursery. Adrian stood by the crib, gently stroking Elise's cheek, his face bathed in the soft amber glow of the night light. He looked up as Clara entered, eyes softening. "You couldn't sleep?" She stepped closer, voice low. "Adrian, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. About Marcus Wren." He froze. "How do you?" "Just tell me," she pressed, voice trembling but firm. "Did he ever threaten you?" He looked down at Elise, then back at Clara. "Last week, he sent me a video, said if I didn't reinstate him and approve the Zurich transfer, he'd make sure you had an accident before the baby turned 1 month old." Tears filled Clara's eyes, not from fear, but from fury. "And you didn't tell me?" "I was trying to protect you," he said, voice breaking. "I thought if I played along just long enough to gather proof." "Protect me?" she whispered, stepping closer. "Adrian, protection isn't silence. It's partnership. And I need you to choose, right now, whether you're still trying to control this alone, or if you'll finally let us face it together." He stared at her, the weight of years pressing down. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. "I've been recording his calls," he admitted. "Every threat, every demand. I was going to give it to Evelyn tomorrow. Give it to me now, she said, holding out her hand. He placed it in her palm. Their fingers brushed, and for the first time it felt like equality, not dependence. Clara closed her fist around the drive. Then tomorrow we go public. Not as victims, as witnesses. Adrian nodded, jaw set. I'll call a press conference. I'll confess everything, the fraud, the cover-up, Marcus's role. I'll take full responsibility. And I'll stand beside you, she said. Not as your wife, but as Elisa's mother, and as a Langston. He pulled her into a careful embrace, Elise sleeping peacefully between them. Outside, the city slept. But in that quiet room, a war was declared. Not with weapons, but with truth. Later, as Clara lay beside Adrian, Elise nestled in the bassinet between them. She heard him whisper, I'm so sorry I made you carry this alone. She turned to him, her hand finding his in the dark. You're not making me. Smiled for press photos at charity events, arm linked with Adrian's, both of them performing healing like it was another boardroom strategy. But at night, when the city slept and the monitors glowed soft green, she'd lie awake, listening to every creak, every car that idled too long below. Then came the call. It was late. Rain tapped the windows like fingers testing glass. Adrian was asleep beside her, one arm flung protectively over Elisa's crib, which they'd moved into their room just for now. The encrypted phone rang, Victor's line. Clara answered on the first buzz. It's Evelyn, the voice said, tense. We just got a subpoena from a Zurich court. Marcus filed a sealed affidavit from prison. He's claiming Adrian coerced him into the fraud, and that Clara is mentally unfit to parent due to emotional instability following the birth. Clara's breath stopped. He's trying to get custody? Worse, Evelyn said. He's petitioning for emergency temporary guardianship, arguing that with Adrian under federal investigation, Elise is at risk in your home, and he's named a third party as preferred guardian. Who? A pause. Your mother's sister, Aunt Margot. Clara's stomach dropped. Margot, distant, cold. A woman who'd once told Clara at 14 that emotions are a liability in our family. She'd never even held Elise. They'll use her, Evelyn continued. Say you're too fragile, too damaged, that Elise needs structure, not sentiment. Tears burned Clara's eyes, but her voice stayed steady. And Adrian? He's being deposed tomorrow. If he doesn't sign a full confession placing blame solely on himself, they'll argue he's unfit too. She looked at Adrian, sleeping like a man who finally believed he deserved rest. He'd done everything right. Cooperated, confessed, faced the consequences. And still they were coming for their child. No, she whispered. Not after everything. She hung up, then gently shook Adrian awake. His eyes fluttered open, instantly alert. What is it? She told him everything about Margot, the affidavit, the custody threat. He sat up slowly, face ashen. They'll use our past against us. Every fight, every time I yelled, every time you cried. They'll twist it, Clara said, voice breaking. But they won't win, because this time we're not hiding. She stood, walked to the nursery closet, and pulled out a small locked box. From it, she removed a thumb drive, her own secret. I've been recording too, she said quietly. Not just Marcus. The nights you held Elise when I was too exhausted. The way you apologized when you snapped. The first time you called her my girl, like you meant it. I knew, if it ever came to this, I'd need proof that we're not who they say we are. Adrian stared at her, eyes glistening. You believed in us even when I didn't. I believed in her, Clara said, nodding to Elise, who stirred and let out a soft coo. And that meant believing we could become the parents she deserves. At dawn, they sat together at the kitchen table, drafting a joint statement. Not for the press, but for the judge. We are not perfect. We have failed each other. We have hurt each other. But we have also chosen, every day since, to do better for our daughter. She is not a prize to be won. She is our reason to heal. And we will fight, Not with lawyers or legacies, but with truth. We love her. We see her. And we will never stop showing up for her. Later that morning, as federal agents escorted them to the courthouse, Clara held Elise close, whispering into her downy hair, "You're safe, my love. No court, no lie, no fear will take you from me." Adrian walked beside her, hand never leaving her back. But as they stepped out of the car, Clara froze. Standing on the courthouse steps, holding a bouquet of white lilies, was Margot, elegant, composed, eyes sharp as flint. "Clara," she said, voice smooth as silk, "I've come to ensure Elise is raised with dignity, not drama." Clara didn't flinch. She adjusted Elise in her arms, met her aunt's gaze with quiet fire. "Dignity isn't silence, Aunt Margot," she said. "It's courage. And you've never had enough of that to hold her." She walked past her, Adrian at her side, cameras flashing like lightning. Inside the courtroom, the judge listened, really listened, as Evelyn played Clara's recordings. Adrian singing off-key lullabies, Clara soothing Elise through colic, both of them laughing over spilled formula at 3 a.m. When it was over, the judge removed her glasses. "This isn't about wealth," she said. "It's about presence. And from what I've heard, you've both finally learned how to be present." She denied Marcus's petition, dismissed Margot's claim, ordered supervised visitation only if Margot completed parenting courses. As they stepped back into the sunlight, Elise asleep against Clara's chest, Adrian pulled her close. "It's over," he whispered. Clara looked up at the sky, clear, bright, endless. "No," she said softly, "it's just beginning." And for the first time in years, she believed it. But deep in a federal holding cell, Marcus Wren smiled as a guard handed him a letter, sealed with a wax stamp bearing a crest he knew well. Adrian was different. He moved with a lightness she hadn't seen since before the scandal, laughing softly as he warmed a bottle, humming off-key while folding tiny socks, his eyes following Elise with a tenderness that felt earned, not performed. "She's going to have your eyes," he said, cradling Elise against his chest as Clara watched from the doorway. "No," Clara said gently, stepping inside. "She's going to have your..." Courage. The kind you finally learned to use for love, not control. He looked up, eyes glistening. "I still don't deserve you." She sat beside him on the sofa, shoulder brushing his. "Deserving isn't the point. Showing up is." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound Elise's soft sighs and the distant hum of the city below. For the first time, the penthouse didn't feel like a gilded cage. It felt like a home, wounded but healing. Then Victor arrived. He didn't knock, just walked in, coat damp from the evening drizzle, face unreadable. In his hand was a thick manila envelope stamped with a foreign seal. "I just got back from Geneva," he said, voice low. Marcus wasn't working alone. Clara's stomach tightened. "Who else?" Victor sat heavily, aged in a way she'd never seen before. "There's a consortium, 3 European investors who backed Vance Dynamics early on. They knew about the fraud, encouraged it, and when Marcus started talking, they panicked." He slid a photograph across the coffee table, a grainy image of a luxury villa in the Swiss Alps. And standing on the terrace, Margot, shaking hands with a man Clara recognized from Adrian's old board meetings. "Margot's not just bitter," Victor said. "She's been paid to destabilize you, to make you look unstable. They want Elise removed from your care so they can leverage her inheritance. Your mother's trust fund activates on her first birthday. $50 million. Clean. Untraceable." Clara's hands trembled, but she held Elise tighter. "They're using my daughter as a financial instrument." Adrian stood abruptly, voice sharp with fury. "Over my dead body." Victor looked at him, eyes piercing. "That's exactly what they're counting on." A heavy silence fell. Then Clara stood, walked to the nursery, and returned with the same locked box she'd used before. From it, she pulled a second drive, one she'd never shown anyone. "I've been tracing Margot's calls," she said quietly. Every time she checked in with concern, she was reporting to them. I have recordings, bank transfers, even a draft custody affidavit she signed 2 weeks before Marcus filed his. Adrian stared at her. You've been preparing for this. I've been protecting her, Clara corrected. From the moment I felt her kick, I knew the world would try to take her, from greed, from power, from men who see children as assets. I wasn't going to lose her to fear. Victor reached for the drive, but Clara held it back. No, not this time. I'm done letting others fight my battles. She turned to Adrian. We're not hiding. We're not running. Tomorrow we go public with everything. The fraud, the conspiracy, Margot's betrayal. Let them see what they've done. Let the world see who we are. Adrian took her hand. Together, Victor studied them. His daughter, fierce and unbroken. The man who'd broken her, now standing beside her not as a savior, but as a partner. He nodded slowly. Then I'll call the press, and the SEC, and Interpol. That night, as Rain returned with soft insistence, Clara rocked Elise in the nursery, whispering truths like lullabies. You are not collateral. You are not a legacy to be managed. You are loved, fully, fiercely, forever. Outside, a black sedan slowed across the street, but this time, 2 federal agents stepped out, flashing badges, watching it drive away. Inside, Adrian stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of tea. They'll come again, he said softly. Men like that don't surrender. Clara looked up, eyes steady. Then we'll meet them, not with fear, with truth. He handed her a mug, sat beside her, and together they watched their daughter sleep. Small, strong, safe. And though the shadows still moved at the edges of their world, in that quiet room, a new kind of strength took root. Not in wealth or power, but in the unshakable bond of a mother, a father, and the child who had taught them how to finally be human. But far away, in a Geneva boardroom, a phone rang in the dead of night, and a voice whispered, "Then we take the child another way, not through courts, through silence." The war wasn't over. Adrian stood at the podium first, shoulders straight, voice steady. He didn't recite a script. He spoke from the raw place where pride had finally surrendered to humility. I built an empire on control, he began. But I forgot that real strength is found in vulnerability. I lied to investors, to regulators, to the woman who loved me even when I didn't deserve it. And in doing so, I nearly lost everything that mattered. He paused, glancing at Clara, who sat with her hands folded, eyes dry but deep with understanding. I took a plea deal with federal authorities this morning. I'll serve time. I'll repay every dollar. Not because I have to, but because I owe it. To my employees, to my wife, and to my daughter, who deserves to grow up knowing her father chose integrity over illusion. A murmur rippled through the room, but Clara stood, stepping to the podium without invitation. They tried to take her from me, she said, voice clear as glass. Not with guns, but with whispers. Not with violence, but with lies dressed as concern. They said I was too emotional to be a mother, that Adrian was too broken to be a father. But love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, again and again, even when you're scared. She looked directly into the cameras. To anyone watching who's been told they're not enough, you are. Not because of your wealth, your title, or your past, but because of your willingness to grow. Then Victor rose, placing a protective hand on Elisa's bassinet. The Langston name has always stood for legacy, he said, voice resonant with quiet authority. But legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It's built in nurseries, in apologies whispered in the dark, in the courage to choose your child over your ego. Let this be the end of secrets, and the beginning of truth. Afterward, as reporters filed out, Adrian turned to Clara, eyes glistening. I meant what I said, about serving time. She nodded slowly. I know. I don't want you to wait for me, he added, voice breaking. If you find peace without me, I won't, she cut in gently. Because you're not the man who broke me anymore. You're the man who's trying to rebuild us with honesty. and that's worth waiting for. He pulled her into a careful embrace, forehead resting against hers. I'll write to her, every day, even if she's too young to understand. She'll feel it, Clara whispered. Love doesn't need words to be real. Later that week, as federal agents escorted Adrian to the detention center where he'd begin his sentence, Clara stood on the penthouse balcony, Elise in her arms, watching the car disappear into traffic. She wasn't crying. She was breathing. Inside, Victor handed her a sealed letter. From Adrian, to read when you're ready. She opened it that night after Elise fell asleep. Clara, if I could go back, I'd trade every dollar for one more quiet morning with you before the world got loud. But since I can't, I'll spend whatever time I have left making sure she never doubts she's loved. Not for what she represents, but for who she is. Tell her about the stars, about her grandmother, about how her mother fought like hell just to hold her, and tell her her father finally learned what really matters. Tears finally fell, but not from sorrow, from release. The next morning, Clara received a call from the prison. Adrian had requested to waive visitation rights for the first month. He wants you to focus on healing, the warden said. Not on him. But that afternoon, a package arrived. Inside, a children's book, The Little Prince, with handwritten notes in the margins. On the title page, Adrian had written, for Elise, your mother is your rose. Protect her, learn from her, and never forget what is essential is invisible to the eyes. Clara read it aloud that night, voice trembling, Elise resting against her chest. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Because even in absence, love had found a way to stay. But in a dimly lit office across the ocean, a new file was opened. Photographs of Clara's daily walks, security schedules, nanny interviews, and a single line typed in bold. Target remains vulnerable. Father incarcerated. Proceed with phase.